Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hello. Good morning. It's Friday, March 3rd, 2017. Cheap Russian imitation there. Not going to fool anyone, I'm sure, but I guess that's going to be a topic of conversation today. Maybe. Perhaps, maybe I have to wait until the audit is done, and then they'll release all the information about this. Daily Co's Radio is live now. We are reminded from Portland, Maine, thanks to Bill. And what are we going to find out about today? 2 hours of the sassiest gossip with Kagro X. That's me, David Waldman, and the Russian ambassador. He's here. He's someone to fear. Get used to it, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. There's not. I can't inform you. I'm sure you've been voraciously consuming. Wow, that's big. It's early for that kind of words. Voraciously consuming all of the news over the last, I don't know, let's say 18 hours or so. And, well, the Russians are in everything, and they're everywhere. I mean, what have we learned in the last couple of days? Of course, there was the Sessions story yesterday. It only got worse and worse and worse. And let's see, man, I don't know what else is in the roundup. Mike Pence, well, he was governor of Indiana. Do you remember that he was governor of Indiana? Hugely important. Governor of Indiana. Apparently, this is a thing, and people need private email accounts. And he used a private email. Well, he didn't use a private email server. He used AOL, of all things. He was still on AOL, but he used private email. And it's totally different because he didn't own the server. I guess there would be some. There are certainly differences. Anyhow, point is he was using personal email. And yeah, the big fear about using the personal email, of course, is that you will get hacked. And he did. How do we know that he got hacked? A newspaper said so. But more importantly, specifically, what they said was that at some point in the, I don't know when it happened. Let's see. Well, look up the story. Did I pocket it? I know I just retweeted it. So if you're following the timeline, you'll find it probably faster than I do. I might as well bring this up myself. But, reported everywhere, but apparently the way it went down, the New York Times has the full story on this bit. I first read, of course, we have to give first credit for the story of Pence using personal emails. I don't know if they really broke the story, but we'll turn to the background story from the Indy Star, the Indianapolis paper, give them their moment in the sun, and if they don't reveal the information that's fun, then we'll go to the New York Times. Because after all, we pay for that now. We might as well jam that in there too. Pence has used personal email for state business, by the way, and he was hacked. Now, that's the important part. It's not that he used private email. It's that he would have used private email for state business. Auto-playing video from the Indianapolis Star. Shame on you, people. Mike Pence routinely used a private email account to conduct public business as governor of Indiana, at times discussing sensitive matters and homeland security issues. So that answers any other lingering questions about what did he use it for. Well, let's find out. Okay, now moving on. Emails released to Indy Star in response to a public records request show Pence communicated via his personal AOL account with top advisors on topics ranging from security gates at the governor's residence. Here's the code. I don't know whether he really did that. To the state's response to terror attacks across the globe. I didn't even realize that they needed to have an Indiana response to terrorist attacks across the globe, but, you got to be worried about everything, everywhere. Why not Indiana, too? Kate Sherrill adding here, it wouldn't surprise me if the Indy Star did break that story. Me neither. They've been doing some great investigative work lately, and it seems to me, by reading this, who knows whether they're overblowing things. They reveal here that they did a public records request, and they probably did. I don't know why they would lie about that, but I don't know why anybody would lie about anything. but it's been going on a lot, but I doubt very much that they lied about this. And it may very well be that somebody else conducted a public records request as well, came up with the story, broke it, and also so did we make such a request, and we're just not going to tell you about that. But I think they probably did it. By the way, we might as well give credit to the writers here as well. Tony Cook gets the byline on this one for the Indy Star. So let's see. He talked about security gates. The state's response to terror attacks across the globe is probably to gasp and say, oh no. In one email, Pence's top state Homeland Security advisor relayed an update from the FBI regarding the arrests of several men on federal terror-related charges, presumably in Indiana. Cybersecurity experts say the emails raised concerns about whether such sensitive information was adequately protected from hackers. It wasn't. Given that the personal accounts like Pence's are typically less secure than government email accounts. In fact, Pence's personal account was hacked last summer. Although the story I read about how it was hacked, it may be that the content of his emails was never in jeopardy. But we'll see. Furthermore, advocates for open government expressed concerns about transparency because personal emails aren't immediately captured on the state's servers that are searched in response to public records requests. Pence's office in Washington said in a written statement Thursday, that's yesterday, similar to previous governors during this time as governor of Indiana, Mike Pence maintained a state email account and a personal email account. As governor, Mr. Pence fully complied with Indiana law regarding email use and retention. Government emails involving his state and personal accounts are being archived by the state consistent with Indiana law and are being managed according to Indiana's Access to Public Records Act. Well, the ones they got certainly were handled that way. We don't know what else is out there, and we may never know. And there may be nothing. Indiana Governor Eric Holcomb's office released 29 pages of emails from Pence's AOL account, but declined to release an unspecific number of others. Because the state considers them to be confidential and too sensitive to release to the public. They should probably delete them, and then we'll beg Russia to find them. That's of particular concern to Justin Kapos, a computer security professor at New York University's Tandon School of Engineering. Maybe they could engineer me a new tongue. It's one thing to have an AOL account and use it to send birthday cards to grandkids. That is true. It is one thing. But it's another thing, and that's the way things work. There's one and then there's another. But it's another thing to use it to send and receive messages that are sensitive and could negatively impact people if that information is public. Indiana law does not prohibit public officials from using personal email accounts, although the law is generally interpreted to mean that the official business conducted on private email must be retained for public record purposes. Pence's office and his campaign hired outside counsel as he was departing as governor to review his AOL emails and transfer any involving public business to the state. So at least he offered to do that. Concerns also surrounded Hillary Clinton's use of a private... It did? Wow. There were real concerns about her use of a private server. Interesting. I hadn't heard that. Pence, as governor, would not have dealt with national security issues as sensitive or as broad as those handled by Clinton. But Pence fiercely criticized Clinton throughout the 2016 presidential campaign, accusing her of trying to keep her emails out of public reach and exposing classified information to potential hackers. Voila. Pence spokesman Mark Lotter called any comparisons between Pence and Clinton absurd, because after all, they're just two totally different public officials who did keep private email accounts and possibly pass sensitive information back and forth using them. But, whatever. More to the point, he denies things. While Pence used a well-known consumer email provider, this is the big difference. Clinton had a private server installed in her home, which of course looks no different from the outside and is either secure or is not. And we know that Pence's wasn't, so what can I tell you? Cybersecurity experts say Pence's emails were likely just as insecure as Clinton's, apparently more so because he was actually hacked. While there has been speculation about whether Clinton's emails were hacked, Pence's account was actually compromised last summer by a scammer who sent an email to his contacts claiming Pence and his wife were stranded in the Philippines in urgent need of money. That was the fun and funny thing that I had hoped to bring to your attention. I won't even need the New York Times, so I want my money back. Let's see. So they got one of those great scam emails. Little frog in the throat here today. I don't know if you can tell. There's a little snow on the ground because it was 75 degrees the other day. So it's a good time to throw us a little loop. And, well, you'll hear it in my voice. Let's see. Corey Nackreiner. It's my best guess at that last name. Chief Technology Officer at a computer security company, WatchGuard Technologies, said the email accounts of Pence and Clinton were probably about equally vulnerable to attacks. Except we have, objective proof that one was hacked and the other wasn't. In this case, the email address has been hacked. He said it would be hypocritical to consider this issue any different than any private email server. Okay, there you go. He and other experts say personal accounts such as the one Pence used are typically less secure than government email accounts, which often receive additional layers of monitoring and security and are linked to servers under government control. Indiana law requires all records dealing with state business to be retained. I think we heard enough about Indiana law there to understand it. Let's see. Indiana Public Access Counselor Luke Britt, that is some title, who was appointed by Pence in 2013, he advises state officials to copy or forward their emails involving state business to their government accounts to ensure the record is preserved on state servers. And it sounds like, at least to some extent, that's what happened. There's no indication that Pence took any such steps to preserve his AOL emails until he was leaving the governor's office. Oh, okay. That's a kind of an important distinction. It's something you're supposed to do during your tenure, not just, I might get caught now because everybody's going to look and ask about my emails. I'll send them along. When public officials fail to retain their private account emails pertaining to public business, they're running the risk of violating the law, Britt said. A good steward of those messages and best practice is going to dictate they preserve those. All of the emails provided to IndyStar, part of the USA Today network, they want you to know, were ones captured on state servers. The emails were obtained after a series of public records requests that the Pence administration did not fulfill for nearly 4 months before Pence left office. The administration of Pence's successor, Eric Holcomb, released 29 pages of emails late this past week. That doesn't sound like an awful lot, but it withheld others, saying they are deliberative or advisory, confidential under rules adopted by the Indiana Supreme Court, or the work product of an attorney. Holcomb's office declined to disclose how many emails were withheld. I would imagine a lot, if only 29 came out. Cybersecurity experts and government transparency advocates said Pence's use of a personal email account for matters of state business, including confidential ones, is surprising given his attacks on Clinton's exclusive use of a private email server. I feel like this is a little bit of padding for for this article. I think we've gotten the gist of what we need to know out of this one, though it does go on at some length. I'm just curious what else is down here. Let's see. A large part of the criticism of Hillary Clinton's personal server. I've scrolled down a lot here. This is the same thing. As another quote from another person saying a big problem is that it was, a security risk. Okay. Transparency issues. I don't know. This is all right. Well, good job panning your article there, Tony, but good job coming up with the story in the first place. I can't be too critical of that. Let's see. What else do we need to cover this morning? I'll open up Pocket and see what I reminded myself to use. And also, I should just take a quick look back at the last couple minutes of my own timeline, because this morning's stuff, I don't know, some of it rises to the level of, yes, we need to read it and talk about it, and some we just need to mention. This one I thought was interesting. Let's see. We'll open up this tweet here. Alan Rappaport, economic policy reporter for the New York Times, had this bit to add to the morning. President Trump, he tweets, has a rocky relationship with the IRS. Now he wants to cut its funding. Now that's a long-standing goal of many conservative Republicans. They hate the IRS and they think that cutting its funding will do something. He links to his own piece here, which is fine. It's entirely within bounds, at the New York Times, which I can read to you because I subscribed to the New York Times. Thanks to your contributions, by the way. If you ever wondered who funds something like the subscriptions to the New York Times and Washington Post so that you can read us all these stories? The answer is you. You do. And actually, that's probably a terrible deal because you already subscribe and maybe even already but you get to hear me read you. Okay. Well, the point is there's more than just the subscriptions that gets funded. Why, just the other day, I took the laptop that runs the show with me to get some work done in preparation for this morning's show on our way to my youngest son's Taekwondo class. And having just cleaned out the car in preparation for swapping it on our way to buying a new used car, I cleaned up the seats nicely, polished them up. We have nice leather seats in our minivan, one of the few luxuries that I absolutely demand in a car, mostly because if kids throw up on cloth seats, holy mackerel, you'll never get rid of it. So it's worth the extra money. Just a little car shopping tip. In my opinion, get the leather. And I've even gone so far as to get aftermarket leather installed in a car that couldn't come with it. We bought, this was a long time ago. You don't need to know this. What am I telling you for? Anyway, but you can do that too, by the way. Another good car shopping tip. It's Friday. Maybe you're headed out shopping for a car. All right, I'll tell you the story. We wanted a Subaru Forester way back when. It was 2003, I think, when we were shopping for it the first time. And we liked the manual transmission. We gave up on it eventually. She put a new Forester, my wife did, and got an automatic, and is perfectly happy with it. But at the time, she wanted a manual transmission. Did not offer a manual transmission with leather seats. Couldn't be done from the manufacturer. I guess they figured if you're buying a manual transmission, you're a cheap ass, as opposed to somebody who just likes the extra control of shifting and enjoys the work of it. It makes driving enjoyable, but screw you. You can't have leather seats. Can't enjoy it that much if you're that cheap. I don't know. I'm not sure why they do that, but they have to make business decisions. Fine. We wanted the leather, and we wanted the manual transmission. Couldn't do it, but you can, in fact, I didn't realize that there were places that'll say, yeah, I don't know, I guess if you pay us enough money, we'll tear out your seats and put leather on them. And so there were. And so we got a very nice job done on it, put some beautiful leather in there, and it didn't make a goddamn bit of difference in the resale value because we drove the car to death. However, if we had changed our minds, we would have gone back to the market with a very unique vehicle, a manual transmission Forester with leather seats. Unbelievable. No one would want it because Subaru knew what it was doing. All right, this is too much about this. Anyway, I like to go off on these little tangents. It humanizes the show. I'm not a Macedonian bot, okay? All right, I apologize. Anyway, I was going to tell you that under Trump, an already depleted IRS could face deep cuts. They could. Oh, yes. Why did I want to tell you that? Oh, yes, right, because I should at least finish the story. I put the computer in the car in the carrying case and put it on the seat, drove to the Taekwondo thing, and it was so nice and smooth and clean, this new leather seating, that the case slid right off when I braked, and the computer went boom, and hit the floor. You know, it's not terribly damaged, but I don't know how long that's going to keep up. Do something like that, need a new computer. How much did this computer cost, by the way? We'll put that on record. This was about a $3,000 laptop. We got a nice souped-up MacBook Pro right at the start. Basically, I just asked the Netroots radio guys, what's the best damn thing I can get so that it'll run for a long time and run all the processes that I need in order to make this thing work? And they said, it looks a little something like this. I went out and bought it. I didn't go out and buy it. Here's the biggest contribution. Did you ever wonder about this? Every time I ask you guys to contribute at Patreon, I'm sure that there are some people who say, I should support the show, but, I mean, this is Daily Kos Radio. Surely Daily Kos supports the show, and everything else afterwards is superfluous. And to some extent, that is true. They bought us this nice computer, and that was fantastic. We could never have gotten started without it. Plus, we needed microphones and software, and I guess we probably spent about $4,000 to get this thing all up and running. But in addition, Daily Kos also helps out the Netroots radio guys with the additional server space and all sorts of other behind-the-scenes things necessary to keep this thing up and running, or at least originally they did. I don't know. I'm sort of divorced from that part of the deal, but that was big helpful thing for getting Netroots Radio up and running and keeping them going and getting them off the ground. And in addition, I mean, I don't, this doesn't occupy a great portion of the front page space over at Daily Kos. It's kind of a weird, isolated, I don't know, I guess back in the day when you could say this without upsetting somebody, the stepchild, I guess, as they said, I think they said redheaded stepchild too, although that was kind of a strange thing too, and poor redheads, they get enough grief as it is, and I don't know why. Anyway, so we get, there's a small stipend, it's about $1,000 just to keep, like, food in the refrigerator while we do this stuff, the gun fail stuff, the radio stuff. It's not a living, is what I'm saying. And so if you're ever wondering about that, we're not maintained at, sustainable career levels from Daily Kos. It doesn't make any sense for them to do that. We don't make any revenue for Daily Kos. We do this because we like it, and it's a lot more fun for me than writing it. That's about it. But I'd like to make it a more sustainable thing, and I would dearly love to be able to compensate more people for more of their time at a reasonable rate when they help us out. And I'm chiefly thinking of Scott Anderson here, and he loves that, and he helps me promote the thing whenever we mention how much he does and how essential it is for us to keep going. So there you have it. That's the pitch for the day. It's and I'll try and do it without the self-deprecation. A very good tip. We just honestly would like to be able to make this work. By the way, I am going to make it back to this story. But by the way, we are running at about we're just under about 5,000 downloads a day on the Libsyn system. There's a couple hundred more each day over at Stitcher still. We don't really, we don't promote the Stitcher download as much as we used to. Libsyn is the numbers that we can measure and measure the best. Of course, there's more downloads via iTunes and a couple other outlets that I don't even know about. I guess just about anybody can download the show and put it on their server as well. Plus, I got a note yesterday in the background that said we were over 200 people listening to the live stream via Netroots Radio's own apparatus. That, again, does not include people listening via TuneIn, Stitcher, other outlets. I think even iTunes can still do it. Anyway. Yes, and many people, by the way, I have a note here, Ride the Curve. Speaking for many people, not huge numbers, but many, who say, I don't like using Patreon. Although I've never seen anybody say they don't like Patreon. And I'd love to hear from you at some point about what it is specifically that you don't like, because I kind of want to the extent that's possible, I'd like to, at least do this thing well and shop blue, if you will. The reason, of course, that we moved away from PayPal was we didn't really want to be paying Peter Thiel. Patreon was not my first choice. I liked the recurrency system, but they went kind of out of business, by which I mean out of business. And we moved over to Patreon because, of course, I like that monthly recurring support mechanism, but not everybody does. And there are a few people that say, I don't mind making a one-time donation, but I don't want to do a monthly thing. And I understand. I've seen people work around it by joining Patreon. That doesn't work for the people who hate Patreon. But joining Patreon and saying, I am a huge, big spender. I would like to donate $100 a month. And they sign up for that, and Patreon, for all they know, is fantastic, terrific. You're signed up $100 a month from now on for Kagro X and the Kagro in the Morning Show. And then they write me a note and they say, hey, I'm not, P.S., I'm not actually sending you $100 a month. I want to donate $100 one time, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for them to charge me for the first month, and then I'm going to cancel my account. And I say, okay, because why not, right? It's fantastic. Support for the show, terrific, no problem. So far, no problems reported by anybody canceling with Patreon. Apparently very easy to do, and no reported problems with it. They don't care, they get their cut one way or the other. So I don't think it's a terribly difficult thing to do, and I think it's a pretty common workaround. As for other stuff, people who hate Patreon, there are other methods, of course, and they include, we still do have a PayPal account. We haven't closed that out. And I don't want to encourage more donation to it because, like I said, I don't want to have Peter Thiel take a cut. But, I mean, if it's the only workable way, then yes, you can find it there. And I'll make that available once again to those of you who write and ask for it. Let's say we can do that. And otherwise, there's the question, well, can you send a check? Well, yeah. You could. You know what? I guess this is where it becomes awkward. Like, what do I do? Where do I have you send them? I don't know if I really necessarily want to, like, give out my address all over the place, but I don't want to rent a P.O. box either. I don't know. We'll figure something out. We'll find a way to make it work, and, you know, it might not work for everybody. But I appreciate everybody who asks the question. It's fantastic. It's really nice that you would want to do that. Like I said, we're getting up to 5,000 plus downloads a day. And, I mean, can you imagine if we really had everybody on a, and what if we had it on a system where you couldn't get the show unless you made a 10-cent donation? That would be fantastic. We'd be rolling in dough. As it is, it turns out that through Patreon, we get what works out to be, if we assume about 5,000 downloads a day, and almost like last month, February, which is a short month, and we did about 19 shows, we fell just short of 93,000 downloads. So we're going to be running about 100,000 downloads a month, right? At $1 a show, that's $100,000 a month. I think that funds just about anything. At 10 cents a show, it's $10,000 a month. That funds just about anything. So I guess the sad news is we're running at about 0.6 cents per download. Is basically what we got going on with about $600 or so, just over $600 coming in through Patreon monthly, and nearly 100,000 downloads. Yeah, you know, that's not a great turnaround, but we can do better, and I'm sure that we will as we grow, add more people who very much want to be a part of the show, and sometimes it's tough, and they can't get around to it until later, and we understand and appreciate that, because how long did it take us to subscribe to the Washington Post and New York Times? We get the point. Anyway, it's out there. It's Friday. It's fair game to waste time on something like this. Dang, I just self-deprecated again. See, I'm not supposed to do that. Patreon.com, patreon.com/KagroX. Solve the whole problem. Shut me up forever. Be a part of the show, and let us keeping you sane. Now, I may have driven you insane, waiting for the story about Trump and the IRS. So let's get back to that, shall we? Under Trump, an already depleted IRS could face deep cuts, right? And again, as we mentioned, Alan Rappaport, the reporter here on this one, President Trump has a rocky history with the Internal Revenue Service, which he has complained audits him with unfair ferocity. Now he wants to significantly cut the tax agency's funding at a time when it has already been bleeding staff and struggling to keep up with the flood of returns ahead of tax day. There are many more details in here about exactly why he might think it's appropriate to cut the IRS, and we might even explore some of those. I just thought, really, don't you think that even just for appearance's sake, the optics of this thing, shouldn't you wait to cut the IRS budget until the audit is over? I mean, we keep being told, well, we want to see your taxes. Well, you know, now, of course, we're told you're just never going to get them. But the old excuse used to be, well, I can't because I'm under audit. As soon as the audit is over, I'll release my taxes. That was a lie, but to the extent that it remains, you know, a part of the political lore surrounding Donald Trump, don't we think that for appearance's sake, he ought not to cut their budget while they're in the middle of struggling to get through this monumental audit? It doesn't look bad for him to cut the funding that they could use to complete this audit. And by the way, where's the executive order saying, get the hell done with this audit already? I thought he was a leader, a go-getter, a doer. Apparently, not the case. Anyway, I'm a little curious about, is there anything else about why you would think it would be a good idea to cut the IRS? Let's see. Well, here's evidence for why it wouldn't be a good idea. New internal data released by the agency this week underscored the pressure it's under. The number of individual tax return audits fell last year to its lowest level since 2004, and enforcement staffing levels were down by nearly 30% from 2010 to just below 16,000 personnel, I assume that is. Criminal investigations related to tax-related identity theft, money laundering, and does anybody think money laundering is maybe important in this administration? Public corruption, that too. Cybercrime and terrorist financing are also on the decline, and IRS officials cited budget constraints as the reason. They just don't have the money to follow the money. There's the issue of unpaid taxes, an enormous cost to America's finances. The federal budget deficit in fiscal 2016 was $587 billion, while the tax gap, the gulf between taxes owed and taxes paid, and this is taxes owed. This is not, well, if we didn't have thus and such a ridiculous tax benefit for corporations, we would make this much more money. This is even after all the ridiculous cuts and breaks that we've given you, you still owe us this much money, but people just aren't paying it. Corporations and individuals. The gulf between taxes owed and taxes paid averaged $458 billion from 2008 to 2010. There's a little typo in here, according to an analysis conducted by the IRS last year. So again, the federal budget deficit, $587 billion. The amount of money people didn't pay in taxes even though they said they owed it, $458 billion. That would take care of an awful lot of the federal budget deficit if people coughed it up. And that, again, doesn't even include Donald Trump, who claimed he didn't owe any taxes. His numbers wouldn't even be in there. Handicapping the agency with an additional budget cut will make matters worse, experts say. I don't think you have to be an expert to figure that one out. Emboldening scofflaws to take their chances against an increasingly toothless tax collector. That's the idea. As funding continues to fall, honest taxpayers are suffering from a lack of attention. The IRS Taxpayers Advocate most recent annual report to Congress detailed how stretched the agency has become, citing the closing of dozens of walk-in assistance centers and longer waits to speak to customer service agents on the telephone. In 2004, a taxpayer with a problem could speak to someone in less than 3 minutes, according to a report. Last year, the report, in case you were wondering. Last year, it took nearly 20 minutes to navigate a maze of automation and hold times to reach someone. Security is also a worry, with cyber threats on the rise around the world. In 2015, the IRS computer systems were hacked. They couldn't find Trump's returns, but they were hacked. As a result, personal data connected with more than 700,000 taxpayers was stolen. With hackers showing increased skill and even a willingness to meddle in American elections. Wow. Hot stuff there, dude. The agency is under pressure to keep its defenses on high alert to prevent further breaches. But help does not appear to be on the way because Donald Trump is president. Republicans have been at odds with the IRS over accusations that the agency unfairly targeted conservative groups. Remember that one? The IRS commissioner still faces calls for impeachment, remember that word, over claims that he covered up information about the IRS's handling of conservative groups. He didn't. The agency's fate was a hot topic in last year's presidential campaign. Ted Cruz, remember him? He suggested the IRS should be abolished altogether. Easy thing to do when you're running to nowhere. Let's see. Anything else we want to pick up on this one? The confluence of it says here, the confluence of a 14% reduction on top of a string of reductions of $900 million over the last 8 years, with the promise of major tax reform later this year. Remember that? They're going to, not only are they cutting their budget and cutting their personnel, they claim they're going to throw them the curveball of a whole new tax system to learn and administer. On top of all that, it's, they say, a recipe for disaster at the country's most significant revenue-producing agency, said Lawrence B. Gibbs, a former IRS commissioner. Well argued there. And as I was reading through, it gave me an idea of something else that I know is in pocket here somewhere that I thought would make an interesting follow-up story. And it's not necessarily about Trump. How do you like that? That makes it good for a Friday. This is a piece from Ryan Grimm over at Huffington Post, I believe. Yes, I mean, I know Huffington Post, but I believe it was Ryan Grimm.
It looks like we have an explanation for the now infamous...
Thank God for auto-playing video. Ryan, this I blame on you. I don't know whether that's your voice in there. I don't think so, but don't do that. God damn it. Okay. Where were we with this one? Yes. PricewaterhouseCoopers. The guys who screwed up the Oscars. I think it's all being laid at their feet at this point right now. Don't know if that's fair, but it doesn't matter. The reason they're in there is obvious in a minute. Ryan Grimm playing with all of us. PricewaterhouseCoopers, or PwCs, as they say. Other debacle. A tax boondoggle that has ballooned out of control. Subheader. If I mention the Oscars, will people read this long story on tax policy run amok? Let's find out. The answer? Yes. I don't know if you will read it, but I will. And it's my show and you're stuck with me. Ready? Let's enjoy. On Sunday night at the Oscars, this is just the hook. PricewaterhouseCoopers had one job. Hand the correct card to presenters who would go on stage and announce the winner of the category. Okay, well, it's Sunday night. That's the one job they had. The other job that they had was counting all the votes and keeping it secret. Okay. Let's see. Let me open up another note here before I continue on. Okay. Interesting. Yes, okay. So just for those of you listening at home, because that's where most of you are listening, Kate Sherrill has sent me another piece here that I think I'll set aside for later on, but relevant to the Indiana angle we were on a few minutes ago. But let me continue with this one. The Oscars, blah, blah, blah. Now, when it comes to the line of work for which it's most known, or I've rewritten that sentence on the fly there, the company's objective is equally simple. Make sure the client pays the lowest tax bill possible. PricewaterhouseCoopers, in case you didn't know, accounting firm. Not just counting votes at the Oscars. That's another kind of counting. They thought it would be a good idea to have them do it. Why them? I don't know, but okay. So normally, they do your taxes. On that front, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and I'll just go with PwC on this now, tends to be a bit better at its job. But if House Speaker Paul Ryan and the Trump administration have anything to say about it, and by all accounts they do, one of the more ludicrous ways the company meets its numbers will no longer be available. What are we talking about? With the help of PwC, one of the big four accounting firms, a growing number of U.S. corporations have taken advantage of tax breaks called the domestic production deduction. Blah, blah, blah. How do you like that? The domestic production deduction. That's worth the price in name alone. The obscure provision is meant to encourage U.S. manufacturing. And you know Trump likes that, right? That's what he's all about. That's the outreach we're supposed to be doing. You got to work with the white working class. We got to reach out and understand. That means bringing back American manufacturing, good paying jobs to make good products right here in America, and also cut everybody's taxes so they can make all that stuff. Well, there's going to be some major revisions. This is going to have to be included, I guess. Check this thing out. This really was good call on Ryan's part here. The obscure provision is meant to encourage U.S. manufacturing, except for the most part, these companies aren't actually manufacturing anything. They are instead relying on a poorly worded or brilliantly worded, depending on your perspective, 2004 law known as Section 199 that created what is now an out-of-control tax break. It's out of control. It's out of control. Got to control it. Got to bring it back into control because it's out of it now. You see? It was written by a PwC partner. Companies are not required to disclose if they have used a particular tax break, except under rare circumstances. But the IRS, which we hate and want to get rid of and cut their budget, in some of its public filings and court documents, has revealed the general nature of some of those claims. Others have been included in public documents when the tax break has led to a big enough windfall that investors need to know about it, and still others have emerged in unrelated court filings. The picture that emerges from interviews and a review of the paper trail is one of a loophole that has grown so large that it is barely recognizable as anything other than a giveaway to companies that can afford the sophisticated tax prep that companies like PwC can provide. Wow, somebody turned up the volume on the answering machine, and I really totally appreciate that. That's terrific. So please stop calling during the show. This is not fair to the rest of you. Oh, I'm going to get a message, too. No, we're not. Okay, that's good. They made the announcement play. Interrupt the show, and then don't leave me. Okay, fine. Terrific. The IRS, to continue, does not name the company when it divulges information on use of Section 199, but rather describes them in a way that leaves only a few suspects. Among examples that the Huffington Post's investigation found in IRS documents are the following. And these are bullet points that I think you will think are kind of fun. This is what ends up happening with this thing. Basically, remember, just by way of reminding everybody, this is a loophole that gives you a big tax deduction if you do your manufacturing in the United States. If you keep your manufacturing base here, and you're a company that does manufacturing in the United States, tax break for you. So who's using it? It's just so badly worded, or brilliantly worded, as Ryan points out, that these are the sorts of things that are happening. Ready? Big box retailers. Who? I don't know exactly who, but, think about who that would be. That usually includes, your Walmarts, your Best Buys, whatever. Costco, I don't know. Big box retailers. Big box retailers have told the IRS that they should get credit for under this exemption. Why? Because the house plants that they sell are growing as they sit waiting to be purchased. That is super genius. I'm manufacturing plants. No, you're not. You bought these plants elsewhere. Yes, I bought small plants. Smaller plants. The plants I sell, big plants. Or bigger than the ones I bought, right? I bought them. I processed them. I manufactured a larger. I put water in there. I put, maybe I even put fertilizer in there. I didn't. But I watered them. I gave them light. I didn't deprive them of light by putting them in a box. Now they're bigger plants than they were before. It's value added. I've manufactured big plants using the raw material of small ones plus water and light. Honestly, that's what they're telling the IRS. Are they getting away with it? Sometimes they are, apparently. Big box hardware stores are calling themselves factories. Wow, really? Why? What are you manufacturing? They cut blank keys for customers. Bring your key. We'll make a copy of your house key. Oh, really? I'm a key factory. As a matter of fact, I got raw materials here, key-shaped chunks of metal. You give me your key. I use the machine I have here, and I'm machine lathing a new key. I'm a key factory. You're a hardware store. I buy garbage bags and furnace filters from you. That's what? How are you a factory? Once I bought a key. You don't have to buy a key here. Somebody else bought a key here. I'm a factory. Okay, tax break. Wow. And how much? They're taking millions, right? Paint stores, and that can include big box hardware stores, right? Or other retailers. Paint stores want credit because they're manufacturing paint, right? What? How? No, they're not. Yes, we are. We shake the paint cans before we hand them over to you. If we just sold you these cans we imported, you would open them up and there would be oil separated and you couldn't be able to use this as paint. It would just all fall apart. It would look terrible. We add the valuable manufacturing process of shaking the crap out of it before I sell it to you. You could probably do that yourself, but not as speedily and as effectively as we can with this paint can shaking machine, which we have. And they do have it. And we need to have huge deductions for it, because if we didn't, then your paint would be less shaken and America presumably conquered by the Mongols after that. Fruit basket companies claim they are manufacturing fruit baskets when they assemble apples and oranges and cover them with a little plastic wrap. That's a good claim. I mean, it's not a great one, but it's better than shaking a can of paint. But okay, you see how it's go. I didn't buy fruit baskets. I bought baskets and little plastic grass, and then I bought fruits of various kinds in mass quantities, And, we pay people to put them together and maybe put a big, styrofoam pyramid in the middle there so that they can pile it up nice and make it look like there's more fruit in there than there really is. And it's a process. We're manufacturing fruit baskets. I'm not saying we make the baskets. We buy the baskets. I'm saying we put all the stuff in the baskets. Buffalo Bill claims he's manufacturing by telling Catherine Martin to put the lotion in the basket. The basket didn't originally have lotion in it at the time it was being pulled up, but she put the lotion in there. They're manufacturers. You see how it's all about the baskets, people. And frankly, Donald Trump is a manufacturer. He's taking us all to hell in a handbasket. We weren't originally in the basket, but he put us there on our way to hell. He's manufacturing. Mark Hogue reminds us that paint stores add color, of course. Do they? I guess they sometimes do. I mean, I don't know. I go to a paint store and I'm like, I need that white paint. And they shake it up and they give it to me. But you can. When my wife goes to paint stores, I want this color over here, and they mix things, and then that's something. But I don't know. Is it manufacturing? I think if you're making the base paint, you're manufacturing. That's the way you and I probably think about it. It's a process. It's a thing. It might be worth a tax deduction. It's just not necessarily manufacturing. It's just, I don't know, it's mixing stuff. But if you tried it, you'd get the boot, I'm sure. Anyway, I think they make a good point there, though. Paint stores are doing something. Did you work at a paint store or own a paint store? Or are you dating a paint store owner? Anything, Mark? I don't know. Thor Gamma is how you can find him on Twitter, by the way. THORGAMMA. And why not? I do think you should all follow one another, and then you can all conspire amongst yourselves to change the direction of the show. It's a valuable thing to do. What else have we got here? This is a good one. A company that manufactures all of its clothes overseas. Does anybody know anybody that manufactures all of their clothes overseas? This is just a company. I don't know if it's the one you're thinking of. But a company that manufactures all of its clothes overseas has tried to claim the deduction because it prints its catalog right here in the good old US of A. Wow. I don't know whether they were successful in that one. It just says tried to claim. So it implicates, it hints that they didn't make it all the way through there. What else? Restaurant chains are getting the tax break. How? Come on. Is really I put peanut butter on one side and jelly on the other side. I keep the hot side hot and the cool side cool. We're manufacturing. Certainly you could claim that credit for the McRib sandwich and the Shamrock Shake. I don't have any doubt about that. But what about for the rest of these? Well, this particular restaurant chain says, we want the tax break for taking pre-baked cakes and putting garnishes on them, or for simply slicing cheesecake. They took a whole cheesecake and they manufactured slices of cheesecake, according to the tax filings they submitted to the federal government. So for filing purposes, some restaurants are claiming they are literal cheesecake factories. And all credit to that one, to Ryan Grimm. That's exactly as he wrote it. I did not embellish that at all. I loved it. Great writing. Interesting too. I mean, so they take a whole cheesecake, slice it up into pieces, and sell them individually. I'm manufacturing individually wrapped slices of cheesecake. That's better. I guess you can't do that with cigarettes, though. You break up a pack of cigarettes and sell them one at a time, you get killed by the cops. Slightly different because there's no tax stamp for cheesecake. Still, interesting to think about. But I love that one in particular, right? I manufactured slices of cheesecake. Really? How did you do it? Tell me about your process. It would be interesting to bake just one slice at a time. That's actually innovative. No. I just buy whole cheesecakes and I cut them into pieces. Then I sell them to people. That strikes me as less than manufacturing. Sports teams. What do you like about this one? Sports teams they've even tried to claim, and I don't think it worked for them, saying they manufacture television entertainment. Now that's a good one. And I think that's probably something that Trump ought to think about taking for himself if he needs more deductions. He, too, manufactures television entertainment. And he really does over at The Apprentice, but I was thinking more along the lines of the non-State of the Union address. Last year, the IRS advised that teams could not, in fact, consider themselves manufacturers, but the networks could. Television show producers have claimed they are manufacturing TV shows. TV networks claim the credit for airing the show, and cable companies claim the credit for combining channels into a bundle. How about that one? Comcast says we're manufacturers. We're taking a bunch of channels and creating a bundle of them and selling that bundle to people. Manufacturing. Who knew how many of you were working in manufacturing jobs and you didn't even know it? Credit card companies like Visa and MasterCard have claimed in investment filings that they are part of the American manufacturing boom. They do make all those cards, of course, but that's not what they're talking about. And then this one, flower delivery giant 1-800-Flowers.com. That's belt and suspenders, 1-800-ANNA.com. 1-800-Flowers.com has said it should get the credit too because it manufactures bouquets of flowers from individual stems. That is amazing. Bees, by the way, are claiming that they should get the tax credit as well because they manufacture the individual stems from pollen. But, there's just not enough bees actually. The problem is that they don't ordinarily make enough income to file federally in the first place. Plus they're bees, so, who can read their writing? The Treasury Department estimates the claims for the credit. And do they have to write there? Is there any requirement that the tax filings be written? If you can't read bee dancing language, isn't that really on you? I don't know. The Treasury Department estimates that the claims for the credit will cost the government $178.7 billion. That's billion with a B, as Ronald Reagan would say. It says right here. Over the next decade. So that would be a nice chunk out of the federal debt as well. Deficit, not debt. Deficit as well. But it's just not there. Paul Ryan's new tax reform proposal, not Ryan Grimm's proposal, would upend the entire corporate tax system and replace it with an import tax meant to boost manufacturing. The Trump administration has signaled tentative support, but the Koch brothers and other major importers are balking, and it is considered endangered in the Senate. But if it becomes law, the biggest loser may be George Manousos, Manousos. That's the guy who came up with this thing. This is sort of the interesting part of the backstory of this provision. I really like the stories of the people trying to claim it, but let's get the full story here because it always pays to come away with additional information and sound super smart over the weekend, I find. So, if there's one person to blame for the current 199 predicament, it is this Manousos guy, a partner at PwC. By all accounts, Manousos is not a particularly bad person. If he were living in a different kind of republic, he would likely be nearing the midpoint of a satisfying career in the field of tax preparation, compensated comfortably, with the fulfillment that comes from a good job well done, and looking forward to an enriching retirement, books, golf, cooking classes. But that's not our republic. Instead, Manousos has used the combined power of his public-private career to help blow a gaping hole in the side of the U.S. Treasury, out of which global corporations have looted hundreds of billions of dollars. For that, he has become a very rich man. Manousos was a mid-level tax specialist for PricewaterhouseCoopers before joining the George W. Bush administration's Treasury Department in 2002 in the Office of Tax Policy. When Congress passed the American Jobs Creation Act of 2004, it created a new tax credit for manufacturing. Manousos was the Treasury official tasked with helping the Republican Congress author the new section of the tax code. They didn't actually know how to do it, so they called someone who did. I was the Treasury representative then, was working with Congress's Joint Committee in the enacting of the provision, helping them, guiding them through it, he told the Huffington Post in an interview. He also wrote the regulations that implement the law, and then I led the government team on the Treasury side on the underlying regulations that were subsequently issued under Section 199, like sports teams can't and TV guys can. The code allows a business conducting, quote, qualified production activities, unquote, to claim a deduction equal to 9% of the income related to those activities. The claim effectively lowers a business's tax rate on that income by 3%. But the legislative language and subsequent IRS regulations were worded so broadly that businesses have used it to claim lots of things no reasonable person would consider production, and allows the companies to pad out their estimates of how much income was actually related to that activity. A company that built a website might try to claim that almost all its revenue is related to that website, for instance. His job finished, Manousos returned to PwC in 2006, this time as a partner. Today, he is held out as the leading private authority on Section 199, and I imagine he is, helping make sure businesses understand how to use it. Read any trade publication story about the fight over 199, and you're likely to come across Manousos advocating for its broad use. I had a heavy hand in writing these rules, and I want to make sure that at least people understand what was intended by them, he says. He recognizes that he gives his clients a heavy advantage over the cash-strapped IRS. When you have taxpayers that have advisors that have the latest and greatest thinking, oh boy, he loves himself, and the IRS is often playing a little bit of catch-up, it can create some ambiguity about what is the right answer, Manousos says. That ambiguity has made Manousos and his corporate clients an awful lot of money. And when Manousos lobbies the IRS, he makes sure to remind them he wrote the law and the underlying regulations. I meet with the government, all levels, regularly when it comes to 199. I work regularly with them both in advising clients as well as always wearing a former government hat. Good old revolving door, I guess. Publicly traded companies are required to report when they file a tax claim that the IRS might contest, so that investors aren't in for a shock when the company gets audited and smacked with the back tax bill. According to the most recent IRS statistics, the manufacturing tax credit is the third most often claimed controversial tax break. The top one, he helpfully tells us, is a credit for, quote, research, another area ripe for abuse. I hope there's a new article on the way on that one. When Visa, the credit card guys, used the deduction in 2014, it ended up boosting profits by $191 million. According to Visa's fourth quarter report, 2015 earnings statement, it saved them $239 million, enough to fund the average food stamp payments for more than 100,000 Americans for a full year. Good comparison. The goal of tax credits, such as 199, is to boost the type of activity that society wants more of. In this case, the government wants more domestic manufacturing and the high-wage jobs that come with it. But the performance of the 199 credit calls that logic into question. In fact, we have a real-world answer to the question. Visa spokeswoman Connie Kim told HuffPo in the $199 million credit covers a period of more than 1 year. In other words, Visa has already built much of the software that it was claiming the credit for in previous years. It claimed the credit after the fact, meaning that the tax policy had nothing to do with inspiring Visa to do it. The activity had already happened. Instead, somebody in the company's accounting department, or more likely at its Big Four tax preparer, simply decided to start claiming the credit long after the basic business decisions had been made. In 2013, the IRS tried to go after that gift basket company for its use of the credit in the case U.S. versus Dean. District, I guess that will identify the company for you. There you have it. It wasn't the U.S., it's the other side. District Court Judge James Selna ruled that eligibility for the credit should be thought of broadly, that by arranging fruit in a basket, the company had transformed it into a new product. It's not awful, but okay. I mean, it has an analog, that I can see in, say, trademark or copyright law. But that's not what they're after here. It was fruit, which you could just buy at the supermarket, and now it's artfully arranged, but I don't know if it's manufacturing. Pulitzer Prize winner David K. Johnston, we love him, writing in Tax Notes Today, mocked the decision. And, it's David K. Johnston, so I want to make sure that you know which words are his and which are mine. So David K. Johnston, writing in Tax Notes Today, mocked the decision thus. Maybe as a columnist, I can claim the Section 199 deduction, he wrote. After all, I just transformed the opinion of Judge Selna into a column, which, to cite the judge, is a new product with a different demand. And he's absolutely right. Those of you who don't understand why that's David K. Johnston's voice are advised to, listen to every show ever recorded back to 2012 so you can find out which one it was when we decided that would be the voice we used for David K. Johnston. Does everybody remember that story? I'm sure some of you do. If not, if I get off on another tangent, oh boy, forget about it. Now here's the things. I should explain these things off the air and sell those additional behind the scenes pieces for $1 a shot. I've seen some people doing that one. Ooh, and that's manufacturing as well. I took words and they were just floating around in the air and I turned them into a podcast. Bingo. I gotta call my accountant. All right. It's a good point David K. Johnston made. Thank you very much. You're welcome. The Treasury Department has tried to curb its use. That is to say 199s. I'm trying to curb the David K. Johnston voice use. In March 16th, 2015 memo, the department said the activities such as cutting keys and storing agricultural products in a controlled environment, i.e. putting stuff in a fridge, should not qualify for the credit. But the directive lacks the force of law and is unlikely to curb the enthusiasm for the deduction. The Treasury is now in the process of writing a new rule curbing its use for software development, and hordes of companies are streaming through the building with regulatory crowbars, working to make the loophole as wide as possible. Financial services companies that produce cloud-run automation services say they deserve the tax credit too, and those programs don't need to be built by American engineers. The code says the credit can be claimed as long as the products are significantly produced by American workers, as flexible a term as you could possibly find. So, who knows what significant means? It's all done in Sri Lanka, but I supervised it, and that's the most important thing. Could that be it? It sets up the ultimate Orwellian irony, Ryan Grimm tells us. The American Jobs Creation Act of 2004 is being used to pay for engineers who need not even be in the U.S., to build computer programs that are used to automate and eliminate American jobs. That's pretty ironic. Approximately $83 billion of the manufacturing credits are being claimed for activities that would not count as manufacturing under any reasonable definition of the term, according to an estimate that the Joint Committee on Taxation provided to Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio in 2013. To put that figure in context, Congress spent months wrangling over how to pay for $7.4 billion in long-term benefits for 9/11 first responders, and later spent even more time looking for $6.3 billion to pay for a major medical research and opioid epidemic bill. They ended up raiding Medicare for the funds. $7.4 billion and $6.3 billion. Out the door on manufacturing credits that don't manufacture anything, $83 billion. To put it a different way, eliminating the deduction would make the government so much money that it could lower corporate tax rates across the board by 1.5 points. According to reliable estimates, that might not sound like much, but it would be an enormous tax cut. Eliminating the deduction would also free the IRS from the costly and often futile process of trying to answer such legal questions as whether a sports team manufactures entertainment. The IRS's advisory opinion on a recent sports team case required page after page of legalese and analytics, which must have cost the agency a fortune in staff hours. Audit rates have fallen to record lows, with just 0.84% of filers getting that dreaded letter in 2014. Unsurprisingly, collections from audits dropped in half, down to $7.32 billion. The average from 2005 to 2010 had been $14.7 billion. The IRS has the power to narrow the definitions of what qualifies for tax credits such as this one, but the IRS has been forced to focus mostly on the fringes. For example, the agency has long held that software is eligible for the deduction so long as it is available for purchase on a disk or via direct download. But software designers who develop apps, streaming services, or online portals have argued that this puts them at a disadvantage. Okay, I understand that. The agency is currently working on a rule to determine what to do about the software problem in particular. You see, not all of the problems that come up are nefarious or made out of whole cloth. That's a real one. For the most part, though, IRS efforts to rein in the use of 199, going after fruit basket makers, for instance, has been beaten back by the courts, which has cost the government time and money while emboldening other companies. All of that time in court and time spent negotiating over the new interpretations with Manassas and the powerhouse accounting firms is time the agency is not spending auditing the filings of the fantastically wealthy filers. Manassas sympathizes with the IRS. The government does the best with the resources that they're given, he said. We all read about how they continue to have budget cuts handed to them and they have to adapt to that. But as far as he's concerned, the deduction is working just fine. From my perspective, the incentive works as it was designed to work, in large part. It was, of course, and that's a great way of ending it, although it leaves unsaid, and maybe he did it so that we could have the satisfaction of coming to this conclusion ourselves. The deduction works as it was designed to work. You and I think the deduction was designed to encourage real manufacturing by real people getting real wages here in the United States. That's not what George Manassas thinks. George Manassas designed the deduction to maximize the amount that could be deducted by the largest number of potential clients. For him, it's a huge success. Any client that comes to him, almost whatever they do, no matter what they do, he can save them an enormous amount of money with a fancy tax deduction that normal people would never think would apply to them and have a reasonably good shot at prevailing in court should that become necessary. So from his perspective, the goal is to save as many corporate clients as much money as possible and look like a hero to them and have them happily fork over gigantic paychecks to him through PwC. Because if we save $1 billion, will I pay you 10 million of it? Sure. Pocket change. So for him, enormously successful. For the purposes of encouraging real manufacturing jobs in America, not so much. That's the part we wanted out of it. We were willing to forego revenue for our country in order to have more manufacturing jobs, but they're not showing up. But it is doing a great job at, I guess, giving the opportunity for George Manassas to have some money trickle down to other people, but we know that that doesn't work either. Interesting. A very a different tack on the show and a different direction, and thanks to Ryan Grimm for providing it. It's not easy in the competitive news reporting environment to get clearance for that kind of story when you could be writing about how terrible Donald Trump's hair is or who is lying about talking to Russians next. And they ought to be reporting that, no doubt. But this is what's great about, I don't know, the remaining newsroom models that we still have left operating in this country. So thank you, Ryan, for that one. Hope you enjoyed that one. Let's see. What other interesting stuff? In from the comment section, the KITM hashtag, Rebecca Romans points out a report from NBC News that says sources have made an arrest in some of the copycat threats to Jewish centers, but authorities do not believe that the suspect is behind the larger wave across the U.S. That reminds me. The other day, it had occurred to me that something extraordinarily dangerous perhaps was inadvertently revealed by Donald Trump's maybe off-the-cuff comments about, you'll recall that asked for a reaction to the wave of threats being made against Jewish community centers across the country. He had somehow hinted that, well, maybe they do it to themselves. That is to say, sometimes people do these things for sympathy, right? It may be the Jewish community itself calling in these threats to make me look bad. I did not pick up on the story and read the details of exactly what it was he said and why he said it. I just saw it in passing via Twitter, and it's awfully difficult. It's never really easy to tell whether you're hearing him correctly through the grapevine, because if it sounds too crazy to be true, it might actually be true for him. Ordinarily, it's a good sign that you haven't heard the story quite correctly, and you're getting it through the telephone game, and it's a little weird. But at any rate, I think many of you picked up on that angle in the story. It worried me a great deal because of the stuff I think that he and his people are capable of. I guess if you combine the inability to accept any sort of responsibility for anything that Donald Trump has, plus the lengths to which he'll go to wriggle out of anything that's being laid at his feet, with the online troll culture that he has attracted and that we discussed in the middle part of the week. And remind yourself that these are people with some technical savvy as well as, being sick individuals. It reminded me of the wave in years past of swatting attacks. Do we all remember what that was? That people were using their technological abilities to spoof the cell phones of their personal and or political enemies, and to call the police and call in while spoofing the enemy's cell phone, so that in tracing the call, it comes up at the police station with your enemy's identity, their phone number, and you call and you say, I'm at my wit's end. I'm holding my family hostage. I've got a gun. I'm not going to no one here is getting out alive, blah, blah, blah. And they can trace the call, and they find out that it's coming from the cell phone of this person you're targeting, and they go to that person's house, and then they bring the SWAT team, and they kick in the door because they think there's a hostage situation, and there isn't. And isn't it hilarious that everybody gets dragged out and handcuffed just because we pranked them? Of course, that's an extraordinarily dangerous prank to pull for many reasons, not the least of which is that people are going in with guns drawn, and who knows what happens after that. But it's sick on a number of levels. What I took away from it was this spoofing ability. I mean, I suppose that means that you could, in fact, if you thought that it was a ridiculous claim that Donald Trump made, and he pulled it out of a hat. Maybe the Jewish community centers are calling in their own bomb threats to generate sympathy for themselves and to make me look bad. Well, that's ridiculous and stupid, and no one should ever say anything like that. You'd have to be out of your mind to do such a thing. You'd have to be even more out of your mind to claim such a thing without any basis. Unless, of course, he had some basis. Now, I'm not saying that he knew that this was true. I'm saying, what if he knew, and it might not even come to this. I mean, he might not think this far ahead, but he might. But suppose he makes the claim and he's just completely crazy, and he's so dumb that he doesn't even think about what it's going to mean to make a dumb claim like this. Now suppose that you are an online troll who loves Donald Trump and has the technical ability to do these things, and you say, I'm so annoyed with the liberal idiots who are laughing at my hero Donald Trump for suggesting something so dumb that it occurs to me I can manufacture such a thing. I can, instead of swatting the head of the local Jewish community center, I can spoof his cell phone and use it to call in a bomb threat to his own JCC. And then, when the police investigate and find out that it was his own phone that made this call, and accuse him of calling in the bomb threat, if they make it that far, if they don't understand swatting and have never heard of such a thing and instead just follow the clues, imagine what that would do. Even if it's later debunked, just one day of reporting in headlines that police say that the threat was phoned in from the cell phone of a prominent Jewish community leader, or for that matter, the head of or an employee of the JCC that was targeted, that would be all that would be necessary. Online trolls would have a field day for the rest of the year, telling people that everybody that was on the record scoffing at Donald Trump's ludicrous suggestion that maybe Jewish people were doing this to themselves in order to make him look bad, they would have what counts in their minds as evidence that that's exactly what happened. That would be an extraordinarily dangerous thing to see happen. And guess what? I think it may already have happened. Did I set this one aside? I made mention of it the other day on Twitter, and then found out that about an hour, I found out later in the day, that about an hour, I think, before I speculated on that possibility on Twitter, somebody had put together a report about the use of spoofing technology, and I don't know whether they connected it to these calls or not, but it was pretty damn close to what we were talking about, or what I had speculated could be done. I wonder where did I put that one? Boy, that's going to require some scrolling here, but I might be able to come up with the tweet itself. Dang. Is it far back? Did it definitely make it into Pocket? Pocket is, well, the Pocket, as I use it, is such a mess. When people really know what they're doing, I guess it's a good organizing tool. Let me see if I can find this thing. And thereby chase down the loose ends there, because I think it's something that we're likely to see crop up in the news, and I'd like to be able to have prepared you for it, to say the least. Let's see. How will I track this one down? Because I don't think I said a great deal in the tweet. I mean, I think I just said, oh, and I linked to the relevant article. I just don't know whether... there we are, yes. As a matter of fact, not that far back. March 1st. So that would have been Wednesday that I saw this thing. This must have been earlier this week. Here we are. David Takaki had tweeted this bit. Let's pull this one up and make sure that, one, I'll include it in the roundup, and two, let's see. So David tweets as truth to power. That would have been truth number 2, and then eliminate the O in power. Truth to PWER. Bomb threats to Jewish centers were made using spoofing and voice masking technology. This according to BuzzFeed. Let's take a look at that article. And I don't know whether, well, we'll find out from the article, whether they were spoofing somebody else's phone in particular, like they targeted the person who they spoofed, or did they just spoof some number that wasn't their own so that they weren't caught. Investigators believe the perpetrators responsible for the latest wave of bomb threats targeting Jewish centers and schools around the U.S. used sophisticated technology to shield their identity. No doubt about that. Mike Hayes is the reporter on this one. Federal investigators believe that this latest wave of bomb threats used spoofing technology, according to a liaison to the Jewish community who spoke with FBI investigators. Paul Goldenberg, National Director for Secure Community Network, a homeland security initiative focused on the Jewish community, which no doubt will be eliminated shortly, told BuzzFeed News that those responsible are leveraging technologies that have made the investigation more challenging. Goldenberg said the investigators determined that some people calling in threats were using spoofing, a tactic where a call appears to come from a friendly or known source when it is in fact coming from somebody else. CBS News first reported on Monday that law enforcement officials believe the attacks were a coordinated effort. However, a law enforcement official told the New York Times on Tuesday that a single person may be responsible for the threats. Now they have, of course, the copycats, as Rebecca tells us about from NBC News. He further added the perpetrator used voice masking technology. That's a different issue, but interesting nonetheless. In one threat that targeted the David Posnack Jewish Day School in Davie, Florida, CBS Miami reported that police said someone who sounded like a woman with an altered voice called the front office and said a bomb would go off in the building. Goldenberg said the SCN has been working 24/7 with the FBI since the threat started and has been in regular contact with the FBI about the investigation. On Monday, bomb threats were called into 30 Jewish community centers and schools in at least 18 states, adding to a growing list of anti-Semitic incidents across the U.S. this year. So far, nobody has been injured. Authorities confirmed reports of threats on Monday in Alaska, North Carolina, Florida, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, Delaware, Michigan, Alabama, Maryland, Indiana, Virginia, Connecticut, Rhode Island, California, Arizona, Washington, and Nevada. No injuries were reported, and the threats came in the form of a series of phone calls on Monday morning, then again on Monday evening. The San Francisco office of the Anti-Defamation League also received a bomb threat Monday afternoon. It was evacuated. Police shut down a section of busy Market Street to investigate. There have been 5 waves of called-in bomb threats so far this year, totaling 100 incidents at 81 locations in 33 states and 2 Canadian provinces. Goldenberg and other researchers tracking these incidents say the numbers seen this year so far are unprecedented. All of that, no surprise. What we haven't seen in this article, though, is, and maybe it's certainly possible that I misunderstand the actual application of the spoofing technology. It may be that you're limited to making it look like a call is coming from a number that is known to the system. No, that can't really be it. At any rate, the way swatting has been described, although I guess it's possible that you can just use it to obscure the number from which the call is actually coming, but claim to be calling from inside a certain address. It may not be that you can pick out a specific target that you want to do this to and steal their cell phone number. I don't really know anything about spoofing, and maybe my ignorance is showing. But certainly the same trick can be pulled that way, and you could probably, let's see. The same trick would really just mean that you were calling from some unidentifiable number and saying, I'm inside the JCC now, and then SWAT, they would come charging in. That won't really work. I guess I need to know whether it's the case. Anybody out there know about the technology? Can you confirm? Is it something that you could say, in other words, could you pick out a Jewish community leader, and if you knew that person's cell phone number or somehow found a way to get access to it, could you call a bomb threat into the JCC and or the police and make it look like it was coming from the cell phone of that person that you had targeted? Do I misunderstand the application of the technology? I almost hope so, because it would be an awfully dangerous thing to be able to do. That would, imagine giving the trolls that kind of quote-unquote evidence to fight you with. Anyway, let's see. Kate Sherrill has another contribution here that looks very interesting. These Mar-a-Lago trips. Yes, President Trump is on his way for his 4th $3.3 million stay for the weekend at Mar-a-Lago, bringing the total, I guess, will be just over $13 million if the trend holds. Maybe there's marginal returns on making repeat visits to Mar-a-Lago. I don't know. But she says that the report is that these trips are hurting local businesses, according to CBS. In particular, she attaches this tweet from Brian Klass. Trump returns to Mar-a-Lago today, the 4th self-enriching trip, by the way, of the last 6 weekends. Each visit costs taxpayers $3 million. Hypocrisy level DEFCON 1. By comparison, side by side, there's a little chart here. Obama spent $85 million in vacation travel expenses over 8 years, or $10.6 million a year. We are so far at $12 million in vacation travel expenses in just 6 weeks for Donald Trump, on pace at 10 times that amount to hit $104 million per year versus $85 million for 8 years. Presidential travel under Obama did not directly enrich President Obama or his family, but of course Mar-a-Lago visits promote Trump brands and profits The membership fee at Mar-a-Lago, of course, raised to $200,000 because of his regular visiting there. And that doesn't even get to the question of whether or not other family members arrive via their own private aircraft and end up having to sell tickets to the Secret Service, etc. And no doubt the Secret Service is taking a lease on property, probably that Trump owns, down there in Palm Beach as well, just like they're doing in New York. Let's see, Obama took his first golf trip after 4 months in office. Of course, Trump was out on the golf course after just 2 weeks. Obama did not make a point of criticizing George W. Bush for vacationing or golfing, but of course 22 times Trump criticized Obama for golfing, and 21 were about his other vacations and their expense. So, yeah, it's getting to be a bit of a hypocrisy problem, to be sure. Let's see. There's also, let me take a look at this other link that Kate included here. Is there any more information, or is this, let's see. This is the CBS News report. Trump's Mar-a-Lago visits are hurting businesses, companies say. His frequent visits to Mar-a-Lago have companies at nearby airports in a financial nosedive. The Secret Service closed Lantana Airport on Friday, that's where he flies in and out, for the third straight weekend because of the president's return to his Palm Beach resort. I guess this is from back in mid-February when he had gone 3 times in a row. He skipped last weekend. Meaning that its maintenance companies, a banner flying business, and 2 dozen other businesses are also shuttered, costing them thousands of dollars at the year's busiest times. So one of the businesses that runs it there flies those banners over the beach, if you've ever been down there, advertising local businesses, and they have not been able to fulfill their contracts because they can't get in and out of the airport. The banner flying company says it has lost more than $40,000 in contracts already. He's killing jobs, I tell you. The airport, which handles only small propeller-driven planes and helicopters, is about 6 miles southwest of Mar-a-Lago, well within the 10-mile circle around the resort that's closed to most private planes when he's in town. Oh, I see. That's not where Trump flies into. It's just closed because air traffic around Mar-a-Lago is restricted, and you can't fly in or land at Lantana while he's at Mar-a-Lago. I was going to say, if it just handles propeller planes, how do they land Air Force One there? Sometimes there's one enormous emergency strip at some of these places, but not the case at Lantana. He flies to Palm Beach International Airport, which they don't have to close when he comes in. That's 2.5 miles from Mar-a-Lago, by the way. So that's actually closer to Mar-a-Lago than Lantana Airport. And of course, because it's a big time international airport, it remains open and handles commercial flights while he's on the ground. But Lantana, not so much. Lantana owners are pushing for compromises that they say will keep their businesses open while ensuring the president's security, like letting pilots fly in closely monitored corridors headed away from the resort until they are outside a 10-mile ban around Mar-a-Lago and a 30-mile zone where flying lessons are restricted. Pilots, planes, and cargo would undergo pre-flight screening by TSA agents, but apparently no compromise just yet. 28 businesses and 200 jobs at stake, but apparently that's not enough to be of interest to Donald Trump, or at least he doesn't give a damn because it's getting in the way of his vacations. An interesting addition to the, I don't know what, the miasma, I guess, floating around here. What else have we got here? Here was an interesting little bit. You know what? I'm going to skip this one. Wasn't there something? I got to scroll down a little bit further and see what else we got to get on the record. And there was something I wanted to skip yesterday until today, but I do want to put on the record. We've certainly heard about, I don't know if there's really any more details to dig out about this thing, but yesterday's farce of having people run around the Capitol building looking for a copy of the Republicans' secret plan for replacing Obamacare. They're not done with it, and, you know, sometimes these things do require a little bit of discretion, but it became a weird game yesterday. Really, honestly, with these guys, you have to figure out, you need to prove to me that you actually have such a plan. At this point, I no longer can take your word for it. You're not going to let me see it because it's super secret? Well, then it doesn't exist. That reminds me also, by the way, I wanted to follow up a little bit on one of the stories or one of the comments we made weeks ago In trying to plan out the Senate slowdown that would keep the amount of time available to Senate Republicans for enacting an actual Trump legislative agenda, should one ever emerge, to a minimum, in addition to slowing down this nominations process, which for the cabinet will shortly come to an end, but of course there are many hundreds and in fact thousands of jobs to be filled in the administration should he opt to fill them all. We're going to eventually move on and see some kind of legislative agenda probably come to the floor. And I was thinking of other ways to sort of slow things down. And there are others, and I guess as that phase dawns, we will revisit that and discuss what those options are. But here's something that I think the administration's, what should we say, proclivity for, well, its tendency to lie about almost anything, everything and anything it can, creates an enormous problem. Of course, we've discussed it in terms of political norms, and I don't know if we've really gotten down to brass tacks about just what sort of, just the breadth of political norms, just operational norms that could be disrupted by this. We mentioned yesterday the fact that the president himself had held that background briefing on his thoughts on immigration reform and had told the anchors of all the major news networks that he was considering this tremendous modification of his immigration agenda that was, quite frankly, very surprising. It was supposed to take everybody by surprise that he was moderating things to this degree. But, of course, he wasn't. And it was all a lie, and then they admitted it was a lie, and I don't know. I guess I expected to see more reaction from the president lying and then being open about the fact that he was lying and why he was lying to the network anchors about something so important. But I guess the news on other fronts has been just too shocking and worrisome or salacious, maybe, for them to pay too much attention to it. But it reminded me, somewhere in pocket, and now it's so far back, who knows whether I'll be able to find it. I'll only try searching a little bit. But there was at least one note somewhere about the accusation was that some of the executive orders, and I'm not sure whether they definitely meant executive orders or they meant instead the presidential memoranda that they have occasionally mistaken for executive orders, but somewhere there was the report that, and I guess I'm really going to have to dig it up after the fact, so this is a note to myself portion of the show about the texts of executive orders. There was a report somewhere that noted that there were significant discrepancies in the text of executive orders as advertised. In other words, the text that was released to reporters when they said, tell us what this new executive order is about, differed significantly from the text that was filed online at the official White House website. And depending on what the discrepancies are, that could make for some really serious problems. And it had happened more than once, as I recall, and if it was in fact done on purpose, that would be enormously troublesome. Of course, what gives executive orders their power legally is the fact that they are openly made and openly published for everyone to be able to see and comply with. And if you are making public pronouncements that they mean X when in fact you have written Y, people won't know which version to comply with if there's significant differences between them. And if you're actually doing it on purpose to manipulate that, I can't even tell you what sorts of problems that would entail. I mean, if you can't count on, and we know you can't count on the president himself showing up and facing the network anchors, the face of American news, very literally, and lying to them purposefully with the idea in mind that they will go out and report something that isn't true so that he can reap political benefit from it immediately. That's a pretty amazing thing all by itself. Add to it that they may be purposefully misreporting, misdirecting the media again on what the content of an executive order is. And you get to the point where essentially, okay, what does it mean legally and operationally for the rest of the government if you literally cannot assume that that thing which the president publicly declares to the news media to be his policy is his policy? One of the things I thought about as a time-wasting tactic, essentially, in the Senate is, there's routine business that goes on that is often taken care of either by unanimous consent or just, sometimes it doesn't even rise to the level of having to ask for unanimous consent. It's just automatically done in the Senate. For instance, if you watch enough C-SPAN, you will eventually see what happens when a written message from the President of the United States arrives at the door of the Senate. And it literally arrives at the door of the Senate. The doorkeeper of the Senate actually brings it in, interrupts proceedings at some point, and tells the Speaker of the House or the presiding officer of the Senate, as the case may be. In the Senate, he'll say, "Mr. Speaker," the sergeant at arms or the clerks or whoever they're recognizing, bring that in. I'm directed by the office of the president to deliver to the House or to the Senate a message in writing. It's very, formal, stilted language, but that's the way we take care of such things. And written messages back and forth between the branches are actually quite important. They have their own legal standing, and that's how they communicate all sorts of things, and any number of things. Reports that are due under statutes, or sometimes veto messages if they come, whatever it is. And of course, the paperwork that goes back and forth from the Congress to the president can be bills that are passed waiting for signature, et cetera, or sometimes legislation that requires presidential findings. And you remember we talked about the complications of that, the enormous amount of power that can ride on a presidential finding, which under normal circumstances doesn't worry you very much what the finding is going to be. But if your president is literally crazy and advised by people who want to create chaos and destroy the system, if that's to be believed, I guess then you have a different question on your hand. Is this president really making these communications? Is he someone's puppet? Can we even rely on the fact that what you say is in this communication is in this communication? There's no process. This all comes down to, there's no process that I've ever seen besides the use of this formal language and the actual delivery of the papers and the recognition of the delivery of the papers. In other words, there's no process whereby the Senate can stop proceedings and say, because it's never been necessary before, hold on a minute, you say you're carrying a written message from the President of the United States? Yes. Ordinarily, you would be forgiven for assuming that that person is carrying a written message from the President of the United States. In this case, you probably should not take that literally just because they say it. One, I don't know that there's anything in that envelope, for one thing. For another, I don't know that what's in there is a written message from the President of the United States. I don't know if it's written. I don't know if it's a message. I don't know if it's from the President of the United States. I don't know if he has any idea. Even if it is signed by him, I don't know that he has any idea what it says. We've already learned that he hasn't read most of the executive orders. He was caught by surprise by the one that put Bannon on the National Security Council. So yeah, he signed it. And yeah, that's probably the case with a lot of presidents. They don't actually read it because they trust their advisors are attempting to actually run the government. But of course, if you have an advisor who's writing these things for you, who's dumb enough or pseudo-intellectual enough, perhaps, to be running around saying, I'm a Leninist. I want to destroy the state. I want to destroy the administrative state. I want to take down the government. I want chaos. You no longer have any basis for, as President of the United States, trusting that guy. Of course, if that's the agenda you share, then I suppose you could trust that he really is trying to take down the government of the United States and destroy the administrative state. But that's, you don't want to actually aid and abet that. And to the extent that we've elected a president who agrees with that as an agenda, we've made a horrible mistake. We need to do something about it. But literally, the president, what does it mean to say you've got a message from this president if he has no idea what's in it or what it means? Nothing. What does it mean to say it's from the president if he, signs in scribblies and, would anybody be terribly offended at this point if I said, let me see that paper? And I don't think this looks like Donald Trump's signature. I mean, would anybody be shocked if it came out? I mean, you'd be shocked just sort of generally speaking, but would you be shocked to learn about this particular administration that something arrived at the Capitol purporting to be a message from the President of the United States? It was in fact never seen by him and never touched by him, and he didn't sign it. It was instead either an auto pen signature, or Stephen Miller or Steve Bannon actually just grabbed the pen and scribbled up and down, trying to make it look like Donald Trump had signed the damn thing. Boy, it's almost as if somebody is turning the machine up even louder as the show goes on. But it's not the case. Anyway, would that surprise you? That Steve Bannon is just signing things like Bob Alexander did in the movie Dave. That's the model for everything, as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, I just wondered, because I've never seen anybody challenge a written message or the receipt of a written message from the president or anywhere else in the House or the Senate. I assume that there's no procedure in place for it because nobody ever thought to write a rule about that. But why should the Senate not be able to question, or an individual senator be able to question that is in fact what's here, and at least get a vote on whether or not to accept it, or whether or not it is what it is? I mean, there could be a whole series of votes. You could waste a whole day, at least one time, and then eventually they'd come up with some sort of process for it. But I don't know. I think there ought to be an option to vote on whether or not to accept this thing that purports to be a written message from the President of the United States. There's more reason to doubt it than to believe it, in my view. And eventually, that will become a non-crazy contention. There's one for you. That's my marker. Mark those words. Eventually, we will have a situation where something important that's supposed to be a written communication from the President of the United States turns out to have been forged at some level. Just wait for it, I guess. All right. Let's see. Other things that I wanted to include in today's show. Let's see. What did we pass on yesterday that we wanted to make sure was a part of things today? Okay. Well, there's a lot. And we're running low on time for it. But let's see if we got this, we got that. Oh yeah, there's another nice long form piece that would have made a great Friday piece. I'll note for the record that I have it, but I don't think this is the day to squeeze it in. This came via KITM hashtag, not in the KITM hashtag, but directed to me from Mark Lunn, who sends both to me and to Greg a nice takedown of Trickle Down, a piece from David Brin, but Mark Lunn sent it to us, and thanks very much for sharing that with us for the show. I want to let you know we have it, and maybe we'll have to shoehorn it in next week at some point. Mark Lunn tweets as Guy Fleegman Mark, GUYFLEEGMAN Mark, MARK. So in case you want to follow along, I appreciate your sending that to us. I don't want you to think that I didn't get it or didn't think it was interesting. Just want to private note me to you. I probably just should have typed that. Anyway, let's see. Some good pieces to read over the weekend that we might not be able to squeeze in, but that I recommend to you nonetheless. Ready? The state of Trump's State Department over at The Atlantic, a trending piece, if you will, on Pocket. Julia Ioffe, who we've called before on the show, called that name before. This is just sort of an inside look at what's going on over at the State Department, given that there's hardly anybody in charge over there. Yes, there is a Secretary of State. No, he hasn't got any idea how the Department of State works. And no, he has no deputies. And no, Donald Trump shows no signs of moving any closer to nominating anybody to help him run the place either. Instead, he has installed an old Trump hand who also helped in the transition as chief of staff over there. She has, as far as I know, no international relations experience whatsoever, but she once ran the Patent and Trademark Office, so that makes her a government person. And sometimes that actually is somewhat applicable from one department to the next. But career State Department people who used to spend their days scheduled down to 15-minute blocks, now literally wandering the halls of the State Department looking for ways to waste time until 5 o'clock when they can go home. Nothing happening. Department of State at a complete standstill. Very interesting. A little bit depressing, but well worth reading. That brings us to something that I meant to bring up the other day, and maybe this was what I wanted to save for today. Steve Bannon at MSNBC putting this thing together. Of course, you know he writes at Rachel Maddow's blog, and this here fits in with part of what we were just talking about over at the State Department and part of what we were talking about the nominations process. Trump's new personnel plan. Leave parts of his administration empty. I suspected he might fall into this policy at some point and might attempt to backfill it by, it might be Bannon's idea to backfill with an explanation for his disinterest in and inability to nominate a full administration and put them in place. If the Senate Democrats prevented him from doing it by slowing everything down, and they should, and they can, and they will, and they have been doing it to this point, you could cover that up by saying, I didn't want to have an administration anyway. And now most people would think that's childish and stupid. There can't be any way anybody could really believe that. But in the middle of it all is Stephen Bannon, who has the news media convinced that he's some kind of visionary genius and a Leninist at that. And yes, he is in fact interested in taking down the administrative state, when in reality all that's happening here is Donald Trump and everybody around him forgot that the Senate actually has the control of this process and can make it take forever. It just never occurred to them that that would happen because it's never happened before, because the president has never been completely bonkers from day one before. Ordinarily, people say, this is crazy, this would be crazy, this would be self-defeating to keep the administration vacant top to bottom so that nobody was in charge of anything. We can't have that, and so we will therefore, yes, even though we disagree with this president very much, agree to large en bloc unanimous consent appointments to fill out the administration. Because if we really held a vote on everyone, like I've told you 100 times, it literally would consume the entire 115th Congress. Trump's new personnel plan, leave parts of his administration empty. Now we'll just have to find out how much. Again, Steve Bannon writing at the Rachel Maddow blog. At a distance, the White House's personnel problems appear to be a mess. Appear to be a mess, you see. Between withdrawn nominations, forced resignations, and empty offices, Donald Trump's team is clearly not where it needs to be more than a month after the president's inauguration. But that's not how Trump sees it, allegedly. Here's how the Republican characterized the issue on a Fox News interview this morning. This would have been back earlier this week, Tuesday, right? And I think that was the one we dissected and played bits and pieces of. When I see a story about Donald Trump, oh, this is his voice, I forgot. When I see a story about Donald Trump didn't fill hundreds and hundreds of jobs, it's because in many cases we don't want to fill those jobs. A lot of those jobs I don't want to appoint because they're unnecessary to have. You know, we have so many people in government. Even me. I look at some of the jobs and it's people over people over people. I say, what do all these people do? You don't need all these jobs. Many of those jobs I don't want to fill. Okay? Believe me. At a certain level, I can appreciate the thinking behind the knee-jerk reaction. I mean, that's Trump. That's all he is that he's a jerk through and through, not just his knees. Trump has failed to nominate people for key posts. He's facing criticism, so he instinctively makes the case that his failure is actually an underappreciated success that only looks like a failure. To acknowledge the problem would be to admit a misstep, which this president isn't inclined to do. But post hoc rationalizations notwithstanding, comments like the one he made this morning suggest Trump still doesn't quite understand how government works. As of yesterday, that would have been Monday of this week, of the top 549 positions in the executive branch that require Senate confirmation, 515 of them don't yet have a nominee. According to the president, many of them never will. Most White Houses would find such an approach ridiculous because presidents want to fill those posts with competent, like-minded people who will help execute an administration's policy agenda. We're not talking about random low-level officials who are overlooked in bureaucratic sea. We're talking about powerful, high-ranking positions throughout the executive branch, tackling issues as diverse as national security, international diplomacy, and federal law enforcement. And by the way, just to put aside for a moment the fact that those people will help you run the government the way you want it to run, clearly a goal you have no interest in. And it's okay because we don't even want the government to run anyway, because I'm a Leninist. Meh. Imagine. Anyway, beyond that, it's just a great reward system. I mean, by the way, if this doesn't tell you, at the beginning of new administration, they actually publish a list in book form, because it's huge, of all the appointive positions available. Is that a word? Appointive? They're appointed positions, and okay. If it isn't a word, it should be. I'll invent it, but I think it might be. Anyway, it's just an unused form of it. All the positions that a president can appoint people to. In other words, jobs he can give out to people and make them happy. This is the spoils system, what's left of it. And it's published in a book that actually has this color of cover, but it is cleverly called, for a number of reasons, and not really the color of the cover, the Plum Book. Plum jobs that can be given out to you by the president for being a good soldier, or for, some way of sort of buying your loyalty and interest in the administration if you were from, let's say, another camp in the primaries, or for that matter, in the general election. In some cases, that can happen too. In other words, these are little bribes that he's legally allowed to pass out to people to keep them happy. But he doesn't want to do that because I hate Washington. But also, he'll eventually, so good, fine. He has less allies. That's fine by me, except the true reason, of course, for filling all these jobs, or at least most of them, is to make things run right. But I don't want that either, because my friend is a Leninist. Forget it. I don't believe that for a minute. So, in the literal sense, to continue with the piece, or just to wind it up here, these offices are filled with people who are responsible for overseeing the day-to-day operations of the federal government. To leave those offices without nominees on purpose means one of two things. Either career civil servants will try to tackle the work that they would ordinarily be done by political appointees, or the work simply won't be done at all. By all appearances, Trump does not know or care about any of this. Even his allies should consider this absurd, for a number of reasons, not the least of which is they won't get those jobs. But okay, a very interesting thing and a piece of the puzzle that you need to keep in mind, and probably about the last piece of the puzzle we'll be able to drop on you before handing things over to the guys on the after show, who will pick up the slack once again, as we always dump on them. But they seem to enjoy the job of wrapping up the news that we don't get to, or, by the way, adding additional perspective to those pieces we did get to. I will also include for your reading enjoyment the piece mentioned yesterday from Digby. Donald Trump wants to run the government as a business, but he's never been any good at that either. I think that probably reinforces some pretty serious and ongoing themes here on the show. Let's see. Another piece of information I will drop on you that I had thought we might shoehorn in, but I thought we did well with that tax piece. I enjoyed that a lot. I hope you did too. The New Yorker has a piece. After Sessions, Where the Russia investigation goes now, that I will leave for your review, because I thought we might squeeze that in there, because you never know whether we'll get through the entire weekend without these predictions coming true. So I don't want you to be left adrift for the weekend in order to get through on that one. And lastly, I will also recommend for your reading over the weekend something that calls back to a previously touched upon theme here on the show. A tweet from Mark Hemingway, who puts it this way: serious question, what was Obama doing when he tried to rearrange the succession order at DOJ on his way out the door? And he links to a USA Today piece, which I'll let you have for the weekend. You remember when we discussed there and puzzled over what is the order of succession when Sally Yates was given the boot? You remember that we read through the statute. We talked about it a little bit with Armando as well. That originally, that Obama had issued executive orders saying that the next in line after the Deputy Attorney General would be the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, but that the job yet went to the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, Dana Bonte, remember him? And no one really knew why. And Trump did it despite the fact that there was an existing executive order from the Obama administration saying that it should be the district attorney or the U.S. attorney for the District of Columbia. Was that okay? Is that all right, even though there was this already existing executive order? In theory, yes, it is, because, of course, it's within Donald Trump's power as president to simply issue a new executive order changing the line of succession. And he did, in fact, do that, but he did it after the fact. Does it matter that it was after the fact? I don't like it. It's not particularly good, but, for me, I'm a stickler for the procedure. I say write the executive order, change it. It's within your power, fine, and then name him. You can do it in reverse, because basically all you're doing is committing your order to writing, and that authority was vested in you as President of the United States in the first place. It's not the worst violation in the world, but it's very interesting, and it does raise some questions, this USA Today piece, and Hemingway raises a good question there. What was he looking to avoid? Read that as a companion piece to yesterday's reading of the New York Times, or mention of the New York Times piece, about the lengths to which people were going in the closing days of the Obama administration to disseminate information and create a paper trail for the investigators and the intelligence community on what was going on with the Russia situation. Clearly, the President Obama, leaving office, knew that something serious was looming, and he wanted to make it possible to have the investigation and have it lead somewhere. Interestingly enough, once again, the reason the Mark Hemingway question is interesting is because it actually validates one of the lines of thinking that crazy old Louise Mensch has latched onto. Dana Bonte, as U.S. Attorney for Eastern District of Virginia, taking over and stepping into the role that Jeff Sessions is now vacating by recusing himself, raises some interesting conflict of interest questions there. Apparently, as U.S. Attorney, Bonte oversaw the prosecution of, you remember that crazy conspiracy theory she was telling us about down in the Carolinas, the weirdo hackers? Apparently that was his case. And now he's in charge of taking over the Russia investigation with the recusal of Jeff Sessions. That's weird. She's weird. I still don't believe her about everything. But occasionally, she's going to come up on something that's going to strike us as worth looking at. I hope you'll take a look at it, and I hope we can keep an open mind about her. Well, I missed my opportunity to tell you about what's coming up on the after show, but I'll try and squeeze a few things in.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Well, I can fit this much in. Peter Thiel figures in their news for today, and I wasted a lot of the time I could have been spending on this talking to you about PayPal and Patreon.com/KagroX, the place you ought to be visiting to help support our show. By the way, throw a little support to the Networks Radio guys as well at networksradio.com. Stay tuned for the after show next.